call Rosie Duffield.
And it is a pleasure to speak in this debate and under your chairship. I rise to speak in favour of the motion to clarify the Equality Act. That's not exactly going to be a shock to anyone here. The debate over trans rights and women's rights has become toxic in recent years, partly because the law as it stands is not clear. In fact, without doubt, this is one of the most toxic issues politicians and campaigners will ever have been involved in. I experienced some pretty terrible online abuse during the height of the anti-Semitism crisis in the Labour Party, but I almost look back on those days fondly in comparison to the spite, vitriol, constant attacks, name-calling, trolling and the daily defamation I face personally, along with women's groups and my friends whose names are in the media every single day. If you talk to ordinary people, and elected politicians do so most days, they will tell you that women as a group need protection in law and trans women also need protection. But these are not the same groups, and this was recognised in the Equality Act when it was legislated. The Equality Act 2010 was one of the last measures of the last Labour government, of course, and it was the outcome of 14 years of campaigning by equality and human rights organisations. It's carefully balanced and it had cross-party support for nearly all of its provisions. It's something we can be rightly proud of as a country, and it's a law that protects against sex discrimination and against transgender discrimination separately, because these are not the same thing. We know that 1 in 4 women will experience domestic abuse in her lifetime. 2 women a week are killed by a current or former partner. 41% of women provide care for their children, grandchildren, to older and disabled people compared to 25% of men. Around 90% of single parents are women. Men are almost twice as likely to be a manager, director or senior official than women, and only a third of MPs are women, despite us making up over 51% of the UK's population. Because of these and other differences in men and women's lives, we need to be able to monitor sex discrimination and provide for the needs of women and girls, particularly when they are most vulnerable. The Equality Act is the law that allows for this, but it is confusion within and about the Equality Act that has led to the toxic debate where people have become terrified to even talk about women's rights, but not all people. And since I started speaking up about this, I've had so many women and men write to me to say thank you, and many who've written to say that they're frightened to speak up for women's rights. These include women and men who work in jobs where it's extremely important that they are able to be clear about the difference between male and female and about who women and who men are. These can be jobs that involve safeguarding children, head teachers, social workers. They include people who work in healthcare, nurses told that they should ensure that hospital accommodation is in single-sex bays for men and women, but also that they should allow people to choose which sex they want to be housed as. Women who work in domestic violence shelters who are terrified of being sued or losing their jobs if they make clear that these are female-only spaces. Female athletes who want their sports to be fair but are afraid to speak up because of the response that they'll get. This was not the world that the Equality Act was meant to create. It was meant to continue on from the Sex Discrimination Act to ensure that men and women are treated equally, while single-sex services, sports associations and charities could be safeguarded. Instead, it's being used to stop people talking about sex, not gender, and sex discrimination. The Equality Act also meant to ensure that organisations should treat trans people fairly and with sensitivity, as employees and customers. But this did not mean requiring other people to pretend that they believe that being trans, for example, someone who's born male and perhaps changes their name, their clothes, who might take hormones or even have some physical surgery, is the same as being a woman. The Gender Recognition Act was passed to allow trans people to obtain legal status to marry in their acquired gender and to be treated as being male or female for the purpose of pensions. It did not, however, intend to provide an access all areas pass to single-sex services, associations, schools, colleges, sports or charities. We really need to offer clarity in this law, and it's the only way that that clarity means we can treat all people with respect. The UK has led the way on equality law, and it can do so again by finding a grown-up way through this debate on trans rights and women's rights. And until we do so, I will continue to speak up, death threats or not.
Yeah. Hear, hear, hear. I call Nick Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship today. As we have heard,